Justin, I am tired of you using cursive Strahd for the example in every video. That's it, I've had it.
Whoa, bro. We don't have to fight about this. Can we just talk it out?
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Game On. And Justin and I are not actually going to come to blows on this one because this episode is another installment of Encounter Academy. And what we're talking about this time is non-combat encounters.
Yes, we are. I have a short story to tell you. So, plane traveler, and we're in a ship. I planned for this nice big encounter to happen, and the player decides that I'm just going to open up the bay doors and suck all the enemies out of the bay, and they did. No combat. Combat was done. So I came up with a whole combat for the whole session, and they circumvented it by doing...
In 5 minutes.
Yeah. A couple dice rolls. But I learned some things from that. Because...
Don't put airlocks in your scene for combat?
Well, that's one. Specifically for anything in space, or I guess in water. But I learned some things from there, and I'd like to tell you what I learned. And I'd like to tell the people what I learned, because I think it's really good for encounters. And that is, I don't want to plan a whole session around one encounter, at least for combat. So, like,
for anything really, you don't want to count on a gaming session being exactly what you planned for, or you can't afford to.
That's just good advice anyway. What I was trying to get at was that I now learned to always be ready for the next scene in case the scene that I thought was going to take the whole night doesn't play out the way I thought it was going to.
Have one on deck.
Yes, basically. Have one on deck, and if you have time, have one, in the hole, or whatever they say in baseball. I don't play sports.
On deck. That's actually where that one comes from.
Oh, okay.
Justin, believe it or not, went to school for sports medicine.
And I forget everything. Well, I forget all that. So that whole thing just short-circuited my night. I was kind of going, what do I do next? And I now know to do the second scene on deck, but also to plan encounters that don't always have to be combat. I was expecting my players to just blast their way through everybody, but, what if the captain wants to parlay with them and you want to learn his or hers motivations? They're not just numbers on a piece of paper that they shoot with you. You have to know their social standing and everything about them, because they're an NPC.
Well, that dovetails into episodes we've done before about NPC creation, right?
Exactly. And, it's like I said, it's not just a name on a piece of paper with some stats. This is actually try to make this enemy a living, breathing character, and be prepared to have different ways of resolving an encounter besides just blasting them.
Well, sure, they have personality, they have their own motivations, they have a psychology, and knowing what they want and how they're likely to respond gives you more options, tools.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's cool because you can also maybe give hints to story elements through role playing with them, or through finding solving the encounter besides combat. If that guy gets away, or if maybe he imprisons you and he doesn't actually kill you and you don't fight, but then you have now more of a chance for your players to, let's say again, they didn't blow this captain out the airlock. They interrogated him. They captured him and interrogated him. They can learn more information about the world, which will help them in the long run, as well as help you give information without being and just a sponge of exposition.
Yeah. Well, look, you don't have to find clues by ransacking the pockets of a corpse, right?
Yeah.
That's one way, but you can also learn things from people while they still have their pockets and the rest of them intact. So, having an alternate plan for how to resolve a scene and how to encounter a particular NPC or opponent. If your players decide they don't want to fight them for whatever reason, you don't have to end the scene there.
No. This is actually an ample time to help make the scene more living than it was before. But I think that there's also the problem where PCs might want to fight when you, the GM, don't want to do that.
Well, yeah, that's actually tends to be the more common problem is players want to make a fight where there maybe shouldn't be one, right? So let's talk about how to deal with that. Okay, so when your players want to have a fight that they shouldn't have, all right, that's something that we've all dealt with. As storytellers, as GMs, we almost anticipate that encounters are going to end in a fight, which kind of goes to your story that you were talking about. But there are times in which your players shouldn't fight. But they're so used to having fights in games that oftentimes their default reaction to conflict is to draw swords and guns and throw punches and whatever else. So what do you do when your players insist on an ill-advised fight? Right? Because you don't want to railroad them either into or out of a fight. That's not the most satisfying role-playing experience, is to be told what to do and what not to do. But by the same token, there are situations, there are NPCs, there are story elements that they're going to encounter that they should not provoke with a fight. Yep. They're not prepared for that fight. They're not going to win that fight, but they may not know that they can't win that fight. And you don't want them to start a fight they can't win, get totally obliterated, and have, a TPK that short circuits the rest of your campaign because you wiped out a party, or even just a player or two players in a party, because that creates a monster disruption and rewrites that you have to do, and it makes characters upset. So really the objective here is to give your party the clues, the information they need to understand how to deal appropriately with a given encounter. And that starts with players that are well-rounded and characters that are well-rounded. And this is a thing that I feel very strongly about. A lot of players, especially newbies and less sophisticated role players, will put dump stats into their sort of social skills and attributes because they think they're never going to need them, because their method of dealing socially with things is waving a sword at it, right? Players should be dissuaded from that, thinking about that. Their characters should be well-rounded. And players who make well-rounded characters should be rewarded with opportunities to use them, right?
I agree.
For non-combat conflict resolution, social skills. They're using their brains, using their personality, using their diplomacy, using their whatever, to get themselves out of trouble or avoid trouble in the first place. So I'm a big fan of writing encounters into an adventure, or if it's a pre-written, to emphasizing these elements in the story that give players opportunities to talk their way out of things.
Okay. That's why you bring a rocker boy with you.
No, that's still a dumb character type. I'm sorry, it just is.
Okay.
But yes, to your larger point, irrespective of the theme of that particular character. The skill set, yes, absolutely. You want to be able to use influence, use diplomacy, use intimidation, seduction, whatever the social skill is, to get what you want out of a scene without having to beat it out of an opponent.
So I have to seduce you in the Curse of Strahd.
That's it. We're fighting this out. No. But what do you do? How do you show people not to fight in a scene, right? It can be tricky because you want them to figure it out before you have to tell them outright, this guy will kill you.
Yep.
So there's a couple of different ways. I mean, intimidation, things like that, but some players just don't pick up on that. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I have used and like to use, if you sense that your players are about to pick a fight or about to get them so deep into an antagonist situation that they're invariably going to have to fight, use an NPC as a sacrificial goat in that situation. Have somebody there that's inconsequential that picks the fight that your players are about to pick with the big bad, who promptly gets obliterated, right? If this guy steps up and starts mouthing off and the NPC in the scene casually swats them away and their head comes off and they die instantly, that's going to send a message to your players that says, hey, that's somebody that I don't necessarily want to fight. Now, this can be an NPC, it can be a boss, it can be a monster, it can be whatever you want it to be. It can even be a situation. But what you're doing there is demonstrating how deadly a situation is before your players step in it.
Okay.
Right? It's giving them that information. And a player that steps forward and wants to use sort of social or intelligence to resolve this, they may have a bunch of stats for that. Hopefully they have built a character that has some skills, but it doesn't have to, social encounters don't have to resolve with rolls.
Okay.
Yep. You can let a player who wants to role play out a scenario be successful just because they've got a creative way to go about it. My preference is to let somebody role play through a scenario if their character has the skills that roughly back up what they're trying to do. I let them go with it. If they hit an impasse, if they, come up dry on what to say next, well, then you can point to the character sheet and say, give me a roll on whatever to sort of jumpstart or carry them over. But you want to give people opportunities to do stuff like that. Players, the other tricky part about this is if your players don't pick up on the hints that you give them, you casually behead an NPC to show them how big and bad the opponent is, and they think, oh, well, yeah, but there's 5 of us, so we could totally take that guy. It's like, no, he's just going to behead 5 of you. But if they don't pick up on the hint and they do start a fight that they really shouldn't start and they really can't win, what do you do then? So how then do you resolve a combat that they lose?
Yeah.
Without the consequences being mortal? With a monster, like we had talked about this, before this video started filming. If it's a monster, well, give your example of the black bear or the dragon or whatever, right?
Yeah, I give the black bear that lives around where we live, where they're totally willing to defend themselves, but they're also like, if they knock you to the ground, which they will, they're gonna run away. Like they're not there to fight to the death with you.
Yeah, they'll take you down to remove you as a threat or an irritant, but they won't necessarily kill you.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe the encounter is in a building and the big bad, instead of casually swatting them and knocking their heads off. Maybe he casually swats them and throws them out the nearest window. You eject them from the scene.
Yeah.
You get them out of the encounter in a way that doesn't necessarily end up being lethal. Or like in your example of the creatures, right? The bear, the dragon, whatever, they may eject themselves from the encounter after they win, right?
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have to knock players to the ground and then kill them afterwards.
Yeah, definitely not.
They can wander off because they've, satisfied the scenario.
Yeah.
So that does it for this installment of Encounter Academy, non-combat edition. Be sure to leave your comments in the comment section below about how you like to deal with non-combat encounters, either avoiding combat or disarming combat as it crops up. And stay tuned for future episodes of Encounter Academy where we encounter other subjects.
Yes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you guys for watching. Stay safe, stay warm, and game on.